Good morning to everybody that's joining us. Welcome to Ask. As you're joining, you can put in the chat what you're hoping to learn from and take away from this session. And also you could join our Mentimeter. Controlling that. Right, Jody, I do have control, right?
You should, yeah.
Should.
Yeah, it says waiting for Amy to control.
Okay,
There you
there
go.
we go. Okay. You can also join our poll that we'll have throughout the session. If you go to menti.com and enter the code, which you'll see on the next page, along with our first question. Are you actively looking for employment opportunities? So we have a great panel session for you today. We have 6 panelists. I'm going to try to pin all of you too. Try that. Oops. And we're hoping to provide you with some practical advice and information today on where you could find careers and jobs related to measurement. I will state that we're not necessarily going to be talking about some of the traditional roles that you might think of, like direct academic positions and or larger testing companies that you might think of. But we are going to highlight some things that you may not directly be thinking about, but we think would be really useful to folks either coming out of grad school or those of you that might be changing careers. I am Amy Hendrickson. I'm the current NCME president and I'm executive director with the College Board. And I am going to be facilitating the meeting. We have 6 panelists that I want you to get to know a little bit better. So we're going to turn to introductions next. As soon as I can get the control back. Sorry. Trying to navigate the PowerPoint from remote control. Okay. I'm not sure why I keep losing it, but okay. So we are first going to meet your panelists. So each panelist will give a brief introduction, a description of their current position and role, and maybe why you most enjoy your job. So I'm going to start with Masha. And there is a link to the slides in the chat. And as you notice, all the panelists have been very kind to share their email addresses, and I know they're very open and willing to answer your questions following the webinar, but I'm going to pass it to Masha first to kick us off.
Thanks, Amy, and thanks, everyone. Hi, good morning, good afternoon. I'm super excited to be here. Thanks for inviting me. So I'm Masha Bertlin. I'm a senior research scientist at Amazon. I work in a relatively small applied science team in selling partner organizations. So essentially, we study everybody who sells at Amazon on Amazon. And my research has always been at the intersection of psychometrics and causal inference. And that's pretty much what I continue doing here. I do love to have the balance of doing both and finding the bridge how both can benefit each other. And I've definitely been lucky to find this group that is open to both. So yeah, I'm excited to talk to you all today and answer whatever questions. As Amy said, my email is up here. Feel free to reach out with whatever questions or concerns or anything you might have. I'm happy to help navigate this wild tech world industry.
Great, thank you. And I know you'll have some great advice for folks as we go through the presentation. So Jody?
Hi, my name is Jody Casabianca. I'm a psychometrician. I was at ETS for 8 years as a measurement scientist, and I recently left and I launched my own consultancy. So I'm here to talk about becoming an entrepreneur. And what I love most about what I'm doing now is I get to kind of carve out what I want to do instead of following a script or a program that's been kind of laid out for me. So it allows me to be really creative. But before I decided to launch the consultancy, I did do some, I was exploring different careers, and I'll talk about the different pathways that I considered outside of like the regular educational measurement field that most of us are in.
Great, thank you. Wendy?
Hi there. So my name is Wendy Christensen. I got my PhD in quantitative psychology. So a number of my people who I was completing my program with, they went off into testing and the like in traditional academic jobs, as well as less traditional jobs. In my case, I work as a statistician for the University of Colorado School of Medicine. And what I specifically do is I work with education data from medical school students. So my position is not a biomedical statistics job, it is an educational statistics job. And what I do in my role is I support basically data analytics that is for curricular improvement and also answering internal questions about the program. And we also contribute to medical education research more broadly through publication and conference presentations. And we also work with other schools towards these ends as well.
Great. Thank you, Wendy. Caroline?
Hey, good morning. I'm Caroline Jar. I work at Curriculum Associates, really focusing on implementation of policy-driven assessments, especially around academic screening and the like. My background is in education. I started off as a classroom teacher, became really interested in research and assessment while there, and got my master's in curriculum and instruction and a doctorate in educational measurement and statistics at the University of Iowa. What I love about my work is I just really enjoy the people I get to work with, and that we're all kind of in working towards a common goal and towards a common mission of just really helping to improve education across the country. So that's what I really enjoy about my work.
Great. Thanks, Caroline, and go Hawks. Dina?
Hello, everyone. My name is Dina Pastor. I'm at James Madison University, and I have a dual appointment there. So one of the roles is I'm a traditional faculty member in our assessment and measurement PhD program. The other role, which is a little bit more unique, is that I work in our Center for Assessment and Research Studies. So this is the assessment office at the university. And so for those of you who don't know what assessment is in higher education, basically we're collecting data to find out if students are achieving the learning outcomes of the university. So we work individually with programs on campus, like the chemistry major, the social work major. We also work with different student affairs programs on campus, different initiatives to collect that kind of information. My title is the Associate Director of Assessment Operations. I oversee our large-scale data collection at the university. So we assess students as incoming first-year students, again, at the midpoint of their academic career, and again, when they're seniors. So I get to oversee the logistics behind that, which is a lot of fun. I also get to work one-on-one with some programs on campus. And when I think about what I like about my job, I think it's fun to be involved with all phases of the assessment process, from anything from helping programs develop the learning outcomes to helping them create measures, to collecting the data, to analyzing the data. So you get to be with it the entire time, which I think is really useful. And I also enjoy really the dual split of my job, being able to also teach. So that's really nice. So yeah, that's me in a nutshell.
You have a great combination there. And finally, Zach.
Hi, good morning, everybody. Zach Warner. I'm the Assistant Commissioner over Assessment at the New York State Education Department. And these statistics are horribly outdated, and I don't know how to update them, but New York at one point was the 9th largest test developer in the United States. And that's put up there against, your Pearsons, your DRCs, and other. We give anywhere between 5 and 7 million tests that are created in-house in our own organization here. I have a staff that is about 80 full-timers, and I have a part-time staff of educators that runs between 600 and 700. And so there's where we get content expertise and otherwise from that. So it's a really neat opportunity to kind of oversee an entire program. And like Dina just said, I love the ongoing ability to touch everything. So we conceptualize my team is involved with adoption of learning standards, starting with conceptualization of constructs. How are we going to, measure this? What's it going to look like? How would we approach this? All the way through, we actually have our own print and ship operation. So for our paper-based tests, those come out of giant UPS trailers that pull into the basement of my building. So it really gives you a perspective of everything that goes into an operational testing program. And I have a psychometric background. I love being able to talk to my psychometricians and say, something that you're going to do really is impacted by the fact that, the printer down in the basement has certain capabilities. And being able to see that whole process put together and talk through is absolutely fabulous. And it's an opportunity that I don't know that I get anywhere else. So look forward to talking more about that in the next few slides.
Okay, thanks, Zach. It's really interesting. With that, we have our next question. Again, I can't navigate it. There we go. Okay, so some of you on the call may actually be at organizations that are hiring. So that'd be great information for folks to have. So if you could, for those of you who joined us after I mentioned this, if you go to menti.com and there's a code at the top of the screen and you could enter your organization name if you are hiring. And we will share these slides. There are slides currently, a link to the slides in the chat, and then we'll share the version that has this information following the webinar. Okay, and I'm going to move on with our panelists. All right, so you've heard quite a different story from the different panelists, but we want to talk a little bit more about what do folks actually do in these roles. So I think we're going to try to do this by, I think, a raise of hands. Hopefully you can see now that they've all spoken, the panelists will be the top ones on your screen. And so it worked really well when we were in person at the conference and you could see it, but I'm hoping that even on this platform it will work. So we're going to just ask folks on the panel to raise their hand if they have or currently do any of these tasks as part of their current role. So who has helped lead a research project? Raise your hands. Okay, who has led a team of researchers, analysts, or other data professionals? Okay. So takers on that one. Conducted internal analysis to support organizational priorities. Okay. Built or improved data systems. Built a research or learning agenda for an organization. Little bit of differences there. Develop data sharing agreements with external organizations. Developed a grant proposal or proposal for internal funding. I'll take a lot of takers on that one. Managed operational analyses and reporting. Published work in a peer-reviewed journal. Sure. Okay. Presented to or met with clients or stakeholders. Advocated for better data and research with a system or institutional leader or legislature. Okay, and finally, worked on a project that directly resulted in a change in policy or practice. Okay, so hopefully you get a little bit of a sense of there are some differences across some of these roles, but generally these are a lot of the types of projects and tasks that you can imagine in any of these roles. So there's some differences, but really a lot of similarity across. So we're going to dig in a little bit more. Get to the next one. Oops, too far. And each of the panelists is going to talk a little bit about specific to the roles that they've mentioned that they're in. What are the types of opportunities and where you could find opportunities like they are currently in? So we're going to start with Masha to talk about tech roles such as she holds at Amazon.
Thanks, Amy. Yeah, I want to first start with just telling you that companies like Amazon and other FANG organizations are actually actively seeking your specialized skills, to my own surprise, because this career path was never on my radar when I was in grad school and at ETS. And this is really because our training in measurement and experimental design and causal inference isn't just valuable in academic setting, it's becoming essential in the tech world world as well. And why? Because like these companies have accumulated such a vast amounts of data, but they need people who know how to properly measure, analyze, and draw valid conclusions from it. This is also an opportunity to have impact at scale. What makes these roles particularly exciting is this scale of the impact. The statistical frameworks that we developed might be applied to products used by millions of people and customers daily. And your work would directly influence decision-making that shapes user experiences worldwide. In terms of some example projects that like leverage the psychometric measurement expertise, so all of these companies have so-called like internal universities, right? So Amazon and like other companies have developed internal education systems, like for example, Amazon Machine Learning University or AWS certification programs. And these obviously require robust assessment methodology to ensure learning is effective. And again, your expertise in test development, validation, reliability analysis is like directly applicable to building these measurement scales, the systems at scale. Of course, I cannot like not to talk about LLMs. They are getting intertwined in our daily work very, very deeply. And there is obviously some fascinating work happening at Amazon as well. So how do we properly evaluate LLM capabilities, right? Can we create standardized assessments for AI systems, right? And these kind of types of questions require both cutting edge AI knowledge, but also classical psychometric principles. So perfect opportunity for our expertise. And I was actually like surprised myself how valuable it is, because like most of the people who like work within LLM space, they, for example, never heard about generalizability studies and iterator reliabilities. And this is what essentially these systems require. So great opportunity and direct application of the skill of our skill set. Then, of course, like all these tech companies constantly gather feedback through surveys, whether it's like surveying internal employees or customers. There's just a vast amount of data there. But of course, like lots of challenges with like non-response bias and like missing data. So again, knowledge of survey methodology, weighting, calibration procedures, and just general techniques for handling weird, sparse, missing data is like incredibly valuable to draw meaningful insight. And of course, like survey development itself, right? So great opportunities there. I would also say, because in order to like evaluate impact, we need like to have like strong experimental designs. The background that we have in test form constructions actually translate beautiful to that space as well. So understanding measurement variance like helps us like ensure valid comparisons across our user segment. And again, the statistical rigor of experimental design that we build helps a lot to draw meaningful, impactful decisions here. And of course, like my personal favorite is just like in general, like causal inference with observational data. So if you had some experience there, that's always like super valuable, because most of the policies and programs that we actually like launch, you can't do the traditional randomization due to ethical, but more often legal issues. So if you have quasi-experimental methodologies in your toolkit, these are incredibly valuable. I would say, like, if you're currently in a PhD program, I strongly encourage you to consider internship opportunities. Unfortunately, the cycle for Amazon, at least for this summer, has closed. Actually, like our interns started yesterday. But in general, these are great opportunities, like monitor Amazon.jobs. For these openings, apply. I would also say, like, if you see the position that you really like, don't hesitate to reach out to me. I'll submit a referral for you. And this is just like, our HR is interesting. So to help you jump over this initial screening hurdle, referrals is what you need. So if you see something that you like, reach out. I'll happily submit this for you. And yeah, any questions, reach out. We'll chat.
Thank you, Masha. That's really helpful. And one topic we'll talk about later is relationships and connections. So there you go, starting already. Jody, you're going to be next when I can navigate to the next screen.
Yeah, so I'm going to talk a little bit about different positions in different types of companies. As I said, I left ETS. I had been in academia, I'd been in industry at ETS for many years, and I wasn't sure that I wanted to continue in that type of role. So my focus was on CR scoring, or human rating systems, and automated scoring. And so when I was planning to, figure out what was next for me, I decided to explore different pathways. So in that first bullet there, you'll see people analytics. That is an area that really relies on psychometric methods. And you'll see people analytics type of positions in many different types of companies. So for example, I have a friend, she's a psychometrician. She works at Penske, the trucking rental company, and she does people analytics. And she's very happy there. So those types of positions are kind of, they're all over the place. You have to look for them. Another area you could think about going into is patient-reported outcomes. So if you think about pharmaceutical companies or healthcare agencies or anything where they're looking to understand what's happening with the patient, they do surveys and all sorts of psychometric stuff. So that's another area that I looked at. But it requires some effort to pivot, right? So if you've been in, if you're a graduating student, you kind of are at an advantage because you're fresh. You don't really have a list in ingrained experience, expertise that would be hard to pivot like myself. But if you've been in education for a long time, it might be difficult to do that, but not impossible. Another area is UX, or user experience research. So this you'll find at all the big tech companies and a lot of other companies that are just, again, survey research, looking to kind of get information from people about how they're using, different websites or whatever tools. You'll find these throughout, I know Google, Amazon, all these companies have those types of positions, and others do too. So different pathways you could pursue outside of education, because there are some companies that are actively hiring, but a lot of the bigger ones are kind of not, in terms of like the educational testing companies, because testing is changing. There's a lot of evolution happening. So if you want to pivot out, this might be a good time. So what I decided to do, I saw an opportunity because, as Masha was discussing, there is a need for psychometrics expertise when it comes to evaluating large language models. So what they're doing is they're actually using, it's really funny in a way, but they're using rubrics and raters and developing systems to score or to evaluate outputs, LLM outputs, as a way of as a way of evaluating. Also, data labeling. So there's a need for this type of expertise. And so you'll see like AI evaluation scientists or AI evaluation specialists. So some companies don't even call it, it's listed under something else, like AI engineer with a focus on evaluation. So you might want to think about that. And so typically these positions, I haven't seen many of them, but they require some kind of AI engineering or LLM expertise, machine learning expertise. A lot of times I don't even look for a psychometrics expertise. It's more about, just focusing on the technical aspect of it. But you'll see these types of positions in the FANG. So FANG is like Facebook, Amazon, Apple, Netflix, Google, and of course, OpenAI and all the big LLM developers. And then you'll see other companies that are focused on like more the development, so like the data development, like Snorkel AI, data annotation, Scale AI. So these are other companies that are popping up, and they're creating evaluation solutions. And so so I've seen some of these jobs on LinkedIn where it's like, oh, become a writing tutor. And basically what they want you to do is on an hourly work to kind of take output and label it, take different outputs from LLMs and label it, or kind of be an annotator, basically. So beyond that hourly work, there's a system, there's staff there that are doing this type of evaluation work. They have their own pipelines. They offer this as a service. So that's something you might want to look into. And then my last bullet there is about create your own. So you can create your own opportunities. That's what I decided to do. So I decided to create a consultancy that focuses on the psychometrics, the traditional psychometrics that, that I'm used to doing. And then also applying psychometrics to AI evaluation. So this is the future. This is what's going to be happening a lot more. So I have like two arms of my business, which is to kind of do, psychometrics to evaluate human traits and psychometrics to evaluate AI. And that, doesn't mean that's what you do. You create your own means. You decide what you excel at, what you want to do, and you create your own business. So I would love to. It's been a journey the past 6 months. But I would, if anyone has any questions on that, please feel free to reach out. I would love to discuss it.
Right. Thank you, Jody.
Yeah.
Next up, Wendy, if you can talk about opportunities related to medical schools, medical universities.
Yeah, so there are so as Jody was suggesting, there are a lot of jobs out there that aren't in the places you might typically look. And the role I ended up in working for a medical school, I definitely was not looking for a role in a medical school, at least directly. And the first way is actually the way I got the job I currently have, which is this was pre-COVID when I was searching for this role. I knew I was returning to Colorado, and I knew that, one place that hires people like me are, universities, and Colorado has a number of universities. So I was starting to look for roles in Colorado, basically by looking at university job listings on their websites. And that can include a lot of different jobs. So like jobs like, janitor all the way up to like CFO will end up being posted. So when you use these sorts of aggregators, it's best to use keyword searches if you can, because then you're more likely to get job postings that are tailored to your skill set. So I would be putting in things like statistics, and then also things like psychometrics, assessments, survey methods. Those are probably keywords that a lot of people who are attending this call would be able to put in as skills that they have. Technologies is also useful as separate keywords. So whatever software packages you are comfortable using, include those in your keywords as well. So search for these individually, search for these in conjunction, and that way you can maximize the amount of roles you see that might be a good fit for you. Another thing that you can do is you can find kind of job portals and aggregators that are specific to certain industries. In the case of medical education, the vast majority, so like a lot of the kind of data-oriented jobs in medical education don't find their way to data-oriented or statistics-oriented aggregators. But they do show up in AAMC Career Connect. And that's because AAMC, the American Academy of Medical Colleges. So this is like the big body that handles medical school accreditation and education in the United States and Canada. So if you go through their career panel, that's where medical schools like to post their jobs just generally. So they'll post their jobs at their institutions, which is usually a university, or they will, and they will also post it on AAMC Career Connect. So you can use the same sorts of techniques for these kinds of places as you would a place like a university. And then another option is basically the sort of very tailored, these very niche listservs that exist. The one that I discovered, being involved in medical education, the biggest one for that is probably I say Dr. Ed, it might be Dr. ED, I'm not quite sure how it's pronounced. But it's a listserv that is dedicated to medical education. So I see lots of job postings go up through it. The downside of the downside of this is that you aren't usually able to limit yourself to seeing just job postings because it's a listserv. People post things, everyone on the listserv sees it. So I don't think this is a good way to do this unless you already have an industry that you're interested in and you do want to be hearing more than jobs. The signal to noise, if all you're looking for is jobs, is probably pretty low, but it is a place to find opportunities. and is worth considering if there's an industry you're interested in or industries that you're interested in. And in the case of medical education, this would be that listserv, and anyone with an interest in medical education can join.
Great, thank you. Caroline?
Great. There we are. So, in terms of education, like the other panelists have said earlier, things are definitely changing in education, but there are some really interesting opportunities if you think outside of the usual suspects. So we're going to start off just looking at school districts. Oftentimes a school district will have an office of assessment or evaluation or office of curriculum and assessment. These are offices that are really focused on dealing with the student data and making sense of it and communicating it to help improve education across the district. Oftentimes these will be larger districts, but the smaller districts though will still use independent consultants. So if you wanted to put on your independent consultant hat, kind of like Jody, there's also an opportunity for to serve several different smaller districts to help analyze their data that comes in and make sense of it. Also, I'm going to put in a plug for teaching. This might be a one that may not have been on your radar, but you bring tremendous amount of skill with math, science, and computer science. With that background, I have my next door neighbor is a computer science teacher. She had kind of whispered that she may be interested in leaving the classroom. Her principal came to her and said, "What can we do to keep you?" She is now working 3/4 time. She leaves every day at noon. She decides to do private tutoring in the afternoons and has her summers off. And so it's a very lovely life that she's created for herself as a computer science teacher. So that's I'm putting that out there as something that's in demand, and you could definitely have the skills and the real world experience that you could bring to the classroom, which would be really valuable. Also consulting roles as an outside program evaluator. These would be roles for oftentimes a State Department of Education or a foundation if they have a grant. We'll hire a program evaluator just to make sure that things are going according to plan, or to see what kind of learnings are happening as the program is being implemented. So it might be a STEM program, for a hands-on STEM program, or an early literacy program, and a program evaluator will be there analyzing the data, collecting. Oftentimes they'll be both quantitative, qualitative, and just putting that together to create reports and to help make sure that the money is being spent as it was intended. Then also just nonprofit, for-profit companies. We mentioned testing companies, of course, that's there. But also there are a lot of education companies out there that are looking at efficacy research on their products. So once it's out in the field, is it working according to plan, or as they're designing it, just the user experience research. We think we have an idea of what happens when you put a program in front of a first grader, but it's very different when you put something a learning tool in front of them. So it's also really helpful to get that user experience research. Also, when we look at, I mentioned kind of foundations, they oftentimes will have evaluation components as well that are looking at the investments that are made from a foundation, and are they getting kind of their own ROI? Return on investment, are they seeing the outcomes that they want and that they intend? So those are places that often tend to hire as well as they're doing their grant making initiatives. Oftentimes when we think of education, I think there's been some really interesting examples that have been shared here that are going to be shared with higher education, but also so there's several opportunities there. We oftentimes think of K-12, we think of the formative, summative, benchmark assessments, and that's what we tend to think of. But also there's an entire world of career and technical education as well that tends to be outside of that K-12 classroom, but that whole sphere is looking at career certifications and how to validate and make sure that students are prepared for various careers. And so the licensure certification area is also really interesting within education, and another way to use your skills outside of that standard English language arts, math, science that we oftentimes think about in the K-12 space. In terms of listings, I have some places here of EdWeek top school jobs, American Evaluation Association. I really recommend LinkedIn, following folks there. If you're not on LinkedIn, I do recommend getting there as soon as you can. And then just individual company websites. So keeping an eye on who you may want to be working with, what kind of companies have good reputations, and just kind of keeping an eye on their individual websites as well. So that is some of the opportunities out there in education.
Great, thanks. I will mention that I think it was 2/3 of the NCME Board of Directors were former math teachers, so clear connection there. And I like the idea of going back to the classroom and giving back to public education. I think that's a great plug. Thank you. Dina, you wanna
Yeah.
talk about higher ed institutional accountability
Yes.
roles?
So I think before I talk about assessment work at the university specifically, let me just kind of put in a plug for just higher education more generally, and not just the academic faculty position. So this is going along, I think, with what Wendy was talking about. There's a lot of roles that are appropriate for people with our skill set at university. So it might be in an assessment office that's going to be more of your measurement kind of positions, but it might also be in institutional effectiveness or institutional research. They definitely need people who are good at crunching numbers there. And then there's also these analytic arms of universities that have to do with like predictive analytics. Like, can we predict who's going to be graduating or not? Who should we be admitting to the university? So you'll see like data scientists, people with skill set that is similar to ours working in those kind of positions as well. I think if you're specifically interested in the assessment work at a university, it's good to know that universities sometimes have an office devoted just to doing assessment, like at James Madison. But that is probably more the exception than the rule. It might be that there's just one person doing assessment work for the entire university, or two people. Or it could be that the assessment work is kind of underneath the purview of the Office of Institutional Research or Institutional Effectiveness. So it really depends on the university. And there might be actual positions that are specific to just doing student affairs assessment work. So if you're looking for titles of what these jobs are when you're out there searching, you might want to look for anything that has the word assessment in it. So assessment specialist, assessment coordinator, director of assessment. And if you're looking for other kinds of jobs, looking for the words analyst, research analyst, data analyst, research scientist, those would all be good bets. I think good places for looking for jobs in the area would be, of course, the Chronicle of Higher Education would be good to follow. For assessment positions in particular, I have 2 listservs here that you might want to follow. And then there's also 4 different organizations pertaining to higher education assessment that you could check out. They also have conferences, and the AIR at the very bottom, that is the Association of Institutional Research, that also has job listings, so that would be another good place to look at as well. But yeah, so that's
Great.
what I have for you.
Thank you, Dina. And finally, Zach, to talk about state education departments.
Wonderful. Yep. And great advice given here. So I won't dwell too much on some of the duplicative of stuff here. But like with any kind of state or local government work, typically this is obtained through a civil service procedure. And that's true in New York. It's true in many states. And you're probably familiar with civil service exams. In New York, we've moved a little bit away from the examination and more to what we call a T&E, which is training and evaluation, which is basically you would submit a resume saying, I believe I meet all the qualifications for this job, and then you're on an eligible list and you get hired from there. New York's done a lot of post-COVID tweaking to the procedures, and now we actually have a program going on where, one, any fees are waived, because there used to be a cost for that evaluation. So right now, any fees are waived. And on top of that, they've really taken out some of the stumbling blocks and hurdles of, well, we're only evaluating between, the month of January and March. And if you miss that, you have to wait a year, some of the stuff that goes with that. So really a good time in New York and in other states to be looking. There's really kind of no harm. If it's something you're vaguely interested in, you could submit a resume and see where it goes. We would advertise on our own website, but also the regular places, Indeed. We have done a lot of social media outreach lately. So if you're following us on LinkedIn or even on X, you might see job postings highlighted. But of course, word of mouth isn't overemphasized. And one of my favorite stories is I hired two psychometricians within a year of each other. One came from ACT, one came from Pearson. They both came from Iowa City, worked across the street from each other, had never met, and now they sit next to each other. And I had said, what makes you want to move to Albany, New York? And they said, because the work sounds interesting. I'm looking for a new challenge. I'm doing that. And they packed up and moved from Iowa City to Albany, New York. And so just the word of mouth getting out there. And it turned out one of them, I was friends with some of her classmates and I knew her advisor well. And so he was able to say, hey, those folks in New York are pretty good. There's good stuff going on there. And the big thing I want to highlight, and I'll talk a little bit more in a couple minutes, is just the wide variety of opportunities. I know there's a very narrow perspective on departments of public instruction or state ed departments, but you really need to do your research depending on what you're looking at. So for example, in New York, my department oversees all K-12 instruction, of course, early learning, so below that, but we also oversee higher education, professional licensing, adult education, including vocational training for adults with disabilities. We oversee museums, historical sites, and libraries. So we have a very, very wide-reaching portfolio. And as a result, there's opportunities inside each one of those. When we did this presentation at the NCME meeting back in Denver, one of the ones I highlighted was that there was a research and statistics position open in our My Brother's Keeper program. If you're familiar with MBK, it's President Obama's program for men and young men and boys of color. And they had a program evaluator essentially position open, of which people could have, certainly brought the skills of this group to and work inside the MBK program, which is just a wonderful opportunity. I work with their assistant commissioner a lot. So it's really important that you look at, the various opportunities. What I'm telling you about New York may not be true. Some places it's a Department of Public Instruction. We focus on K through 12 instruction. And so you're going to be limited to that, which is great too. There's a lot of opportunities, but there is variability. So my biggest kind of pitch for state government, that kind of work, is don't paint it all with the same brush. It's worth your time doing your research and saying, what are the opportunities there? Because if you live in, Indiana and the DPI isn't the way to go for you, that's public instruction, I didn't see anything there. Well, guess what? They have a higher ed institute too. Maybe they have something. Me, it's one-stop shopping. Another agency might be different. So just kind of getting the understanding of how your state education agencies are set up and where the different opportunities might be, and not limiting it just to education agencies. We have the Office of Children and Family Services, who we actually exchange employees with all the time. We recently stole their data director, which was very good news for us and not so much for them. But there's opportunities that really, if you're in this field, you can jump around. And I mentioned civil service right at the beginning of this. Well, what does civil service do? Well, they make tests. So they could really use some good psychometricians over there, let me assure you. So good opportunities all around. And I'm going to talk about some of the specifics in a few minutes.
Great. Thanks, Zach, for highlighting all that variety. We have another Menti question. If you joined us late, you can join on menti.com and use the code at the top of the screen. And so what's been the most challenging part of your job search? Finding jobs. So hopefully you're getting some advice today on places that you can look for that. Getting interviews. I know there was a question in the chat about remote positions too, so that might be a challenge if you're not looking to move. I'll give it another couple seconds for folks to add in. Hopefully we can help with some of these challenges today, or start. Okay, again, hopefully you're getting some advice. We're going to get into some more practical metrics here too. So hopefully that will help with some of the challenges that you're facing as you're looking for a new job. Okay, I'm going to try to stay on the one screen. Thank you. Okay, so next we're going to talk about how job seekers can prepare for new careers, and in particular, if you're switching careers and you know you have skills and experiences, how can you kind of highlight those and transfer those skills to maybe new experiences. So I'm going to start with Jody on this question. If you have any advice for folks.
Yeah, so my my biggest piece of advice here is to learn Python. Because if so when I was at ETS, there was a lot of SAS usage and R, and of course proprietary software. But now going into different, if you really want to have opportunities and options, Python is the way to go. I prefer a mixture of R and Python because I'm stuck using R. Like I just prefer it for different types of analyses. But if you want to have a long career in psychometrics or anything that's technical, um, in my opinion, it seems like even basic psychometrician positions are looking for Python now. So I highly suggest learning Python, or at least having something in your toolkit so that you can say you know basic Python when applying for jobs. And so that I think would open doors if you know Python. And of course, there's the whole AI conversation. I often say I have like AI fatigue because it's just so much, AI, AI, AI. But the truth is, again, if you want to if you're not about to retire, and you want to have a career in the next, if you want to have 30 years of working, you're going to have to kind of immerse yourself in that, like using it every day in a responsible way, obviously, and having it be part of, you know, um, your toolkit and understanding how it could be used and when it shouldn't be used in different scenarios. So I think that, Python and AI are two things that would open doors, and help kind of get you in the door, if you weren't already beforehand. Yeah, so that's my big piece of advice when it comes to skills. Yeah.
Sure. Thank you. Okay. And Masha, and I know some of what Masha and Zach are going to talk about is really the language that you use in applying for these jobs too. So you may have the skills and experiences that they're looking for. How do you talk about that? So Masha, can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, sure. So let's maybe start with your resume, like CV. Something that might surprise you, despite like our extensive academic experience, you need just one page. Yes, just like a single page. This is what like tech companies are looking for, because like we really value conciseness. But again, make every word count. I strongly recommend like transforming academic achievements into business impact statements. So instead of like saying, I've developed a new IRT model, you should rather say, I've created a scoring algorithm that improved assessment accuracy by X%, right? Numbers really matter here. So if you can quantify your impact, that's what you need to do wherever possible. Another like common mistake I see is candidates sticking rigidly to academic terminology. And while all of our expertise will be super valuable in the day-to-day work, you need to translate it into the language that tech companies use, right? So look at job descriptions very carefully and try to mirror the terminology from the job posting. So for example, of saying measurement and variance analysis, you might say something like, ensuring consistent model performance across user groups, right? Same things, completely different language. In terms of like technical requirements, I just want to reinforce what Jody said. It's time to add Python to your toolkit. This isn't like really optional anymore. It's kind of more of the requirement, unspoken one. The good news, Python is very logical. It's very simple. It uses similar logics like R. So just like learn a couple of like packages, pandas, NumPy, scikit-learn, etc. And also for the tech interviews, if you can take them in Python, that's always a plus. But you have to prepare, right? So like utilize LeetCode and other kind of like prep services. Another thing that I think like you just like, if you haven't done this yet, and I hadn't done it when I was applying, and I think that was like a big mistake, but it's like building your portfolio. If you don't have a GitHub account, go and fix it. now. It is what gives employees opportunity to familiarize themselves with your technical skills, right? Like showcase your code, contribute to open source project, demonstrate your ability to work collaboratively also, right? And even small contributions matter. So start creating repositories, show how you can apply statistical methods to the real world programs. Another plus to have, though you'll pick it up on the job, is SQL and cloud computing. So for cloud computing in particular, if you can get an AWS certification, that would be great, because this is what like everybody's using. It's essentially like the opportunity to productionalize your models, because very rarely you are interested in developing like a one-time solution. You want to have something scalable that is like out there. So for example, for some of my like causal models, I like refresh estimates like every month, and it's like goes into all the kind of like reporting, right? Like obviously I'm not sitting there and doing this job every month, right? I just have a production pipeline, which is also like extremely hard to set up with R. So that's like another reason why you need Python, right? Because like when you build models for productions, Python works really well with like AWS infrastructure. So say if you can get an AWS certification, you should do it. None of SQL or AWS infrastructure is complicated. It's just like new, but like given, and I know how strong the technical expertise of our community is, like you'll pick it up in a moment. Yeah, so I think that's kind of it. Let me know if you have any questions.
Great. Thank you, Masha. Zach, can you talk a little bit more about targeting your resume and highlighting your skills for SEAs?
Absolutely. And the good news is for us, you don't have to know Python. So if you do, we'll take you for sure. But so because we're an SEA, you know, we are actually not, we don't answer to our governor. We answer to a board of regents that's appointed by a legislature, but still government work, you're bound by the civil service policies. So we have to show that you qualify for the job title, which will have some sort of hilarious name, you know, assistant in educational institutional research, things like that. But the big thing is look at the job posting and see what the criteria are. And then your job when applying is to show how you meet those qualifications. And it's going to be really important that you take that very seriously. And here's why. I'm not going to get to see your resume at first. What's going to happen is you're going to go through our Office of Human Resources, who is going to be an employee that is just that, an HR specialist. And their job is just to make sure that if I came back and said, yes, this is the person we want, that you will ultimately get appointed without a problem. And so they have no background in what my office does, and they'll be doing the same exercise for somebody who works in the professional licensing department and is going to be an architect. So they are not, you know, they are not specialists in this area. And so what they're going to do is they're going to match up words. And so if you use a lot of buzzwords, they're not going to know what they mean, up to and including perform psychometric analyses. Well, if the call on the job thing says something about, you know, conduct statistical studies, and you write perform psychometric analyses, they're going to go, I don't think this person qualifies. So it's going to be really important that you mirror that language, because your job is just to show, yes, I have this experience, I can do this. Once you've gotten through that hurdle, then you will meet with me and my team and that is your chance that you will be telling us, hey, you know, here is what I can do, here's the experience I have, etc. So that's when you can tell us, and we'll know we're content experts for there. But the important thing is to get yourself in that door. And that second bullet there is important because I do want you to read the entire description and think about what's going on. Like I said, I'm not sure anybody in this group would have clicked on an assistant in, I can't even remember what that was. Assistant in professional education, something. But if you had clicked on that, you would realize, like I said, they were looking for a program evaluator for the My Brother's Keeper program. And you could have brought your skills to that and grown into that, and also probably learned some new cool stuff too. You got to get yourself in that door. Another nice thing about government work is once you're in the door, other opportunities open to you. So You come in and you start in my office and you go, well, I have, this type of experience. And we say, well, this job is with our test administration side. And you go, okay, well, I'm kind of stronger on the development side, but I know the importance of standardized administration, and I can help schools through that. Well, when 6 months from now, a job that's a promotion opens up on my development side, you're an obvious candidate. Or you've come into my office and you said, yeah, but my heart is really in accountability. Well, guess which offices work very closely together and know each other well, and trade employees all the time. Accountability, we work with our colleagues in special education, bilingual education, curriculum and instruction. So there's the really mobility within there. And you can see an example of what a job description might look like. And I have no control over that whatsoever. But I would need you to explain exactly how whatever you did, and I guarantee any of my fellow panelists could meet this qualification based on their experience, but would need to come at it differently in how they're adjusting their resume. So if you just want to blanket us with resumes, it's going to end up hurting you because I might not even get to see your resume, or I'm going to find out about you after the fact and they say, oh, but they didn't qualify. And I'm going to have to say, hey, we'd love to have you apply for this, but you need to do this, 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 and it will take a lot more time by. So it's really just important to remember that there are those different layers, and your immediate job is to get past layer one. Then come meet with me and tell me about all your skills, tell me what you can bring. And we have a lot of flexibility there. I joked about Python, but I'm serious. If you came in with Python skills, I've got work for you that we'd love to have. If you came in with 0 Python skills, that's okay, because my first question is, what do you need to be successful? I was always just where I went through a methodology program. So I was a major SPSS and R user. Well, we got here and they said, how are your SAS skills? And I said, really poor. And they still are. But I've got 3 people that are great SAS programmers. And, anytime we trade files, we just, we're able to work with the other one's in. So yeah, and I see Masha put it in the chat here too. Right. Once you're in, there's lots of opportunity, but just do what you need to get in that. And I'm really glad I see Fan asked that question. Can a person who knows SPSS only have a chance? As I said, you're looking at that person, and I am an assistant commissioner, of the entire agency that runs it. So yes, absolutely. We would not, it's really about what's up here. Can you get the answer to a question I ask? I need to know how this is happening. I am not going to look over your shoulder and go, really? You call that SAS code? That's pathetic. Not something I have time for, and not something I care about. If you can do accurate analyses and you can do that work, that's the part you're going to sell me on after you've adjusted your resume to just make sure you meet those criteria.
Thanks, Zach. You're starting to highlight the idea of the context and the relationships which we're gonna talk to next. One Menti question for you though first. Getting there. Sorry, y'all. I'm trying to do this from remote desktop, and it's.
You want me to move it?
Yeah, that'd be good. Okay. Thank you. Okay. So for those of you who have been on the job market and found a job in the past, what's been the most effective way you've found a job? So we got a few options here. Yeah, submitting your CV and resume, networking. It's the one I'm assuming is going to keep moving up. I know, Caroline, you mentioned LinkedIn earlier. That's definitely a good avenue to take. Okay, lots of folks submitting their CV and resume. Right. Glad we could give some practical advice around that today. Okay, and some with networking with friends and colleagues. So we're going to dig into that aspect a little bit more as we go to the next slide, and I'm going to pass it to Wendy to kick us off talking about what connections or relationships have been most beneficial in your career path.
Yeah.
Jody, maybe you can move it. Thank you. Okay.
Oh, sorry.
There you go.
Got
it. I need a cue to get my brain to start working.
Yeah, it's all right. There you go.
Yeah, so in terms of connections and relationships, I think that just connections and relationships kind of exist in a lot of places. And of course, we've talked about some of the more evident ones. We've talked about LinkedIn, we've talked about different, sort of, and then, conferences. We're all familiar with conferences. I have to say that probably my most unexpected relationship, like the relationship building opportunity that I didn't really think about, but ended up being quite influential for me is just applying for jobs. Because if humans review your resume or your CV, they have kind of met you. And the reason why that comes up is that, so like I said, I was job searching pre-COVID. I was trying to return to Colorado. So I actually applied for a role on the team I currently work on. That was a role that had, it was a less technical role, but it was just like, okay, this is an office where I feel like I could grow. So even if I'm sort of overqualified for a little while, maybe I can build here. So I send in my materials. And I didn't actually hear back. So it's like, okay, things happen. But then a couple months later, I got a reply. I got an email from who would become my boss saying, hey, you weren't quite the right fit for this role, but we literally just posted the statistician role that you are probably very qualified for. Please apply. So before that experience, I did not think of applying for jobs as networking, but it turns out it is. So just me applying to a job that opened up a door that I didn't expect to have opened. Another thing is these kinds of connections that you make in your professional community and sort of communities that you're involved in. So for example, I have been on a conference board before. And it's a way of getting to know people in your professional community in ways that you might not normally interact with them. It can be a way of demonstrating soft skills to people who may be eventually interested in hiring you or who may be aware of roles that their friends or their colleagues need to have filled. And they think, oh, I know that person has the technical skill. And as it turns out, they are great to work with when you need to fix a program in, you have 2 hours to revamp an entire conference program. Like they remember you working with them under the gun for getting this conference thing put together. When I was in graduate school, I was also involved. So I was involved in local meetups that were related. In my case, it was R and data science. Those were the meetups that were available in my area. So I was involved in those. And I also participated in on-campus communities. So sort of student governance and the like. And that isn't to say you should try to sign up for everything under the sun, because that is obviously a prescription for burnout. But I think choosing some extracurriculars that maybe seem like it's like, oh, well, this doesn't advance my research and it's not, improving my LinkedIn profile, but it can still be helpful for you as you are looking to launch a career, because those soft connections are often very good headways into roles in a way that just job aggregators and the like, and things on LinkedIn by themselves, it gives you more opportunity in that way.
Thank you, Wendy. Yeah, I'll make a plug for volunteering for NCME committees is a great way to meet a variety of folks in different areas and build on some of those soft relationships. Caroline, anything to add to this question?
Yeah. Interestingly, the connections that I've found to be the most valuable in my career have been really the people that I've gotten to do really good work with. So whether that was in grad school and we were all, my classmates and I were all working towards studying for a particular class, or just those moments where I've just gotten to do really good work with people. I think that those have been valuable to me because they've gotten to see the quality of work that I can do. They've also, if we're doing good work, then they probably are also calling me on things and letting me know, hey, there's some opportunities for improvement here and there. I've had really good bosses that I've appreciated working with and working for that have helped me. And then I think that as you're thinking about building those relationships and building those networks, it's so important. I think submitting applications is fantastic too. I love that idea of that as kind of a network, but I some of the research out there shows that like 75% of jobs are actually found just through networking. And so I think that that's really valuable and something important to keep in mind and continuing. Like, networking doesn't just happen when you're job searching, it happens all the time. And so just continuing to build that muscle around networking. One of the researcher out of Stanford, his name is John Krumholtz, he did a lot of work with happenstance learning theory. And essentially what this is, this learning theory is that we all learn through happenstance. And this is actually how we find some opportunities in our careers. That it's not necessarily checking every box or applying to every job, but that like happenstance happens. And how we take advantage of that happenstance is helps get us to that next level and to get us to that next place. And happenstance, you can actually kind of create happenstance and create those opportunities to bump into people or create those opportunities to network. And so it does require some intentionality and being thoughtful about that. One thing that I found, here we are in a virtual environment, and I sometimes are like, how do I network and online? One thing that I've found to be really helpful is sometimes, after this type of an event, or if you meet someone, just kind of like follow up with a little email, and then it sometimes helps to send something along that they might find valuable. I would, during COVID, and I was doing independent consulting at the time, and trying to reach out to people and network, I would send like a white paper that I had just published, or maybe you find an article that's interesting that relates to their to their particular skills or what they're looking for. So finding like that as a little follow-up, saying, hey, as a way to show that you have some like mutual interest, some connections there. And that you have something to offer as well, that you're not just trying to get something from that person, but you want to also be part of that connection and help them out too. So those are just some things that I've found. As you think about happenstance learning theory, like some of the best people I've gotten to work with were by happenstance. I was at a conference one time and there was a little bit of a networking event, in my presentation, I allowed a little bit of time for networking because there's some great people to network with there. I was talking to one woman. It turns out what I was presenting on was kind of data systems within complex organizations and how do you streamline all of these different channels. She had the same challenge in her organization. She is working with a large national nonprofit in Canada. Here I am in the US, and we were talking about our overlaps. And then after the session, I'm like, well, I'm going to go get lunch. Do you want to come with me? And she's like, sure. So we went and had lunch, and we kept talking about the different challenges and how we were overcoming them. And then we saw, we realized like, well, why don't we put together a proposal and present on this? Because we recognized we had so much in common. We had something that we could contribute. So we ended up doing that. And the next year I went with her to go present in Halifax, Nova Scotia at the Canadian Evaluation Association on all of our on large nonprofits and how they manage different sort of channels of data. So you never know where things are going to lead you. And I think just being open to some of that that networking and being really intentional about it is really valuable.
Great, love those examples. Thanks, Caroline. And Dina, anything you want to add to this?
There's been so much wonderful advice that has been offered. I guess I'll just add a couple things. Some of this might be obvious. You've heard it 1,000 times before. Summer internships, particularly for those of you in graduate school right now, are wonderful to get. Because I think that allows you to showcase your skill set, right, to a future employer. So definitely something to do if you can. I think also presenting at conferences, because you need to show off your interpersonal skills and your oral communication skills. And if you have to submit a paper, your written communication skills. I mean, those are going to be key for any kind of job that you go into. So I think pushing yourself to be out there at conferences is great, not just for the networking opportunities, but also to kind of to showcase the things that you're good at. I will add in this is kind of going off a little bit of what Caroline said as well. You forget that the people that you're currently working with right now could be your future employer one day. So particularly for those of you who are in graduate school, you might be like, okay, I'm finishing up. I got, I'm with my group of students here. Well, keep in mind too that the students that are starting off, they might actually be interviewing you 5 years down the line for a job. We are in a very, very small community. And so I hate to say that being in graduate school, you're on a a job interview the entire time you're there, but do keep in mind that, you know, the person sitting next to you in class might be the person interviewing you 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road. So it's good to kind of maintain good relationships, I think, with your colleagues, you know, your coworkers, your faculty members, anybody you're working with at the time, because they could be a job opportunity for you down the road. So again, maintaining those good relationships, always a good thing to do.
That's great advice. Thank you very much. I'm going to open it up to any panelists who want to give any last advice about any folks that are on the call about their next career step. We do want to reserve some time for questions at the end, but if anybody has a quick piece of advice you want to share.
Well, I'm gonna repeat the same advice that I gave during the NCME session, which is to be kind to yourself, because this is not an easy process, and it's also not an easy time to be looking for a job. It's very difficult. So just pat yourself on the back for every application you submit, and be kind.
Thanks, Jody.
Mm.
Anybody else?
I could jump in really quickly
Caroline?
with, I think being open to the unexpected. You know, you might have an idea of what what the ideal job is or what your role is. But it might not turn out that way, and it might be something completely different. And so I think just being open, you've seen examples here of Wendy and Masha, you know, that came in with a certain background, but now they're, you know, in interesting other places that they may not have planned to be in the first place. So I think that just being open open to new ideas and open to examples that you had never thought of before. Like what I'm doing right now, my background is in science education. And what I'm doing right now has a lot to do with early literacy, and I've learned so much, and it's just kind of fun to see what you actually, where your career leads you and what you get to learn along the way.
Great, thank you. Yeah, and we're hoping that today's session gave folks some of those ideas, right, of things that they may not have originally thought about. So, Masha, that was
Yeah,
good.
I would just like say also don't let the imposter syndrome hold you back from applying to any of the tech roles or any other roles, which are your dream jobs, because your expertise is far rarer and more valuable than you might think. And while job descriptions might list dozens of requirements like Python and AWS and God knows what else, just like remind yourself that the key thing is about how you can think rigorously about measurement, experimental design, causal inference, just answer these important questions that leaders are looking for. So apply. And I would say this especially, I would push my female colleagues, don't be afraid. Don't let this stop you. Apply, apply, apply.
I think that that's super important. I think what has just been said. And so I agree with the advice, but I'll just add a different take on it too, which is don't get held back, but at the same time, it is up to you to sell yourself. You know, employers are not going to dig through everything and go, huh, I wonder if this person really has these qualities that they're not showing me. You know, so it becomes on you. Find a way to package yourself as, hey, I can do this. I can bring a lot to your organization. I'm flexible. I'm this, whatever it is. You know, if you come in with the I'll do whatever you guys tell me to, it's like, right, and so will every other, you know, brand newly minted graduate student. You know, show me, well, hey, I did this before. Here's what I can bring to that experience. Here's where I can that. I think, like Masha just said, there's amazing experience that's out there that you bring that comes with you. It's your job to put it to the forefront, and then it's our job to go, wow, I can harness that, and together we'll do great things at our organization.
Great, thanks, Zach. Okay, I'm gonna make a plug for a couple of more resources before we open it up to questions. So one, a heads up. So on the NCME website, we do have a career center, and I want to especially mention that it is free to post any positions on the NCME Career Center through the end of 2025. So we really want to encourage folks from organizations where you do have some openings. We'll be posting those opportunities in the newsletters throughout the year, et cetera. So it's really great free advertising for you right now. And those of you, of course, seeking a position, you can go and check out what the positions are there. Also, just wanted to highlight this list that Marianne Perry has been gathering, and it's a little bit broader than just measurement or psychometrics, more education-related jobs generally, but a great resource. And you could reach out to Marianne to either add to that or with any questions. And then one last, which I think Carolyn is actually on the call. So maybe Carolyn, you could talk through the slide once I can get it to move to it. Yeah. Carolyn, are you still on?
Yes, I'm here. Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
So, yeah, while today's panelists represent established employers and you here are job seekers, Agora Education Services occupies a unique middle ground. We emerged as a direct response to recent workforce reductions at the Department of Education. We just incorporated in April. So we specifically are people from the National Center for Education Statistics and their contractors right now. Rather than seeing these experienced NCES staff and contractors scatter into individual consulting arrangements, we recognize that our combined expertise creates something more powerful than the sum of our parts. Our emerging organization offers expert educational measurement and data consulting to states, districts, nonprofits, and research institutions. We provide two key resources for this community: access to vetted data professionals that you may want to hire directly, and specialized research services for organizations needing our collective expertise. For employers, we're a source of proven talent and specialized capabilities that emerged from decades of federal education data experience. Some of our people are on this call, by the way. We have a few here. For job seekers here today, we represent both a potential pathway as we plan to expand beyond our founding members to include outside expertise. We also represent a professional network of colleagues navigating similar transitions. So that's just, like I say, we're a little bit of an in-between organization. We're actually here seeking work. We just started up and are just getting established. Whereas many of the panelists are in organizations that have existed for years and are clearly offering employment to you. And so I say we're a little bit in this middle space. So it's kind of a fun and interesting thing to watch, sometimes a little scary. And especially right now as these court cases make their way through, things are shifting all the time, but we're trying to remain flexible and just, going for opportunities as we can. If you have any questions, just let me know.
Great. Thank you so much. And at the top of the chat, I did provide the link to the slides. So you will have that. And you can have those direct links. We'll be sending out access to the location of the recording on the website as well as the slides again following the presentation. But I'm going to stop sharing so we can see folks and see if you have any additional questions for the panelists. There were a couple questions that came up in the chat, but I think they mostly got answered as we went along.
Hi. I have a question about I don't know if I missed this part, but I think I struggle getting past uh the resume and CV parts, but I think I'm getting or I'm struggling with getting past that part of the application process. And also, I don't, when I'm making a resume, do I turn my 6-page CV into just 2 pages or 1 page? I guess I'm just struggling with those things. And um, if I miss that part, then I'll go back and watch from the beginning. But I was just wondering if any of you had advice or maybe a link that was already shared on how to do that.
I'll
I think,
jump in.
yeah, please.
I think.
Thanks.
Yeah, and that's a great question, and you didn't miss it because I think, and we had this go by in the chat too. The answer kind of here is it depends. So you really need to look at what you're applying for. And so when Masha talked about the Amazon side of things, they are get it down not only to 2 pages, get your 6-page down to 1 page. Relevant experience. Who are you there? On my side, from the government, honestly, I would not recommend a 10-page, CV, but it's not going to stop. Nobody in our human resources is going to go, this is too long. It's their job to read it and match up qualifications. So I'd try to be efficient, but it's really going to depend. And I'll bet you have skills that both organizations could use. So the reality is you're going to have more than one resume. So you need to know, kind of what you're applying. A lot of places do a pretty good job of telling you kind of what the expectation is. Like if you go to the state of New York and it'll tell you this is the application process, they'll say, in there, some basic things. But the big thing on our side is going to be, can you match those keywords? And if you heard me earlier, we're very, very literal because the person doing the evaluation is not an expert. So again, like I said, the joke I used was if you said, oh, I conducted psychometric analyses, and they look at the job description and it says perform statistical studies, they're going to go, oh, those aren't the same thing, even though all of us on this call go, what do you mean? Those are the same thing. They don't know that. So your job would be, okay, I am going to put in my resume, I used to have this one about statistics. I'm going to change it to I now perform statistical thing and tailor it. So you're not going to be able to blanket everything with the same resume. It's going to be targeted dependent on which organization you're going to, using their key terms and then also using their approach. So again, the private corporations and especially technical are going to be much shorter to the point. On my side, you can make it as long as you want, but you've got to hit those key terms.
I'll just add, folks in our field are very willing to help, right? And so if you can identify somebody that's already at an organization that you're applying to, whether that's on LinkedIn, whether it's on this panel, whether it's NCME member directory, folks will help you, right? They'll be happy to review what you're putting together and give you some advice. So again, it will depend on the position, but also maybe trying to identify someone that you could talk to that's in that position already to get more direct advice on what they would be looking for.
Thank you.
Other questions?
I just want to bring up something about the resume, and this became a big thing for us at Agora. If you go on our site at evaluator.org in the personnel section, you'll see a bunch of people with resumes. And one of the questions that came up, like even on LinkedIn, what do you do when you want to post a kind of general service resume that will attract in people without repelling them? You don't want to be too specialized. So, it just became a conversation. The idea of posting your resume versus the resume that you use when you're applying to a specific job. I don't have real answers to that because I haven't done a study and I have no evidence as to what really works. But one thing that we recommended to people was to keep it, like you said, 1 page. Some people did go to 2 pages. But what you do really is you put there at the bottom something to the effect of, for my full resume, please, email me at so-and-so. So sort of a partial resume when you're posting, and then some kind of recommendation to contact you for the more full resume, in which case now they know who the employer is and can send that specialized resume. So I just want to make that little point about posting your resume versus sending your resume in?
Andrew, interesting question. How is AI changing the job search or prep process? Is it useful? Not useful? Jody, you might have some insight on that one.
Yeah, I was just gonna say I found it semi-useful. So I had the I had the shocking realization that I needed to create a 2-page resume, and I have like a 15-page CV, and I said to myself, I don't know how to begin. So I started there actually. I just plopped my CV into ChatGPT and please summarize this or shorten it, whatever. And it, nothing really replaces your own work when it comes to that stuff, but it did give me some ideas. It also helps with formatting and doing a lot of stuff that just takes time. But when it comes to writing, I find that it's not that it almost feels like I'm cheating, which is kind of in a way it is. But my voice was gone. And that to me was very important. So there's certain things that you can do that I find useful. Like I said, with formatting and other things, and coming up with like summary statements can be helpful. That's another thing. But when it comes to what Masha was describing as coming up with bullet points that describe impact, only you can do that. So if you want to quantify how many dollars were saved or how many analyses you did to support this process, I don't know how well AI can do that. I found that I needed to do that myself. And I also found that you have to basically be a marketing agency for yourself. You have to come up with the brand. So like if you have a 1 or 2 page resume and you have a lot of other stuff that you want to share, create a website. Create a website, get a GitHub or whatever, some kind of online source where people can go and get more information. And you can use AI to help with that stuff too. So
Yeah, thank you. Okay, in our last moment, any last questions? I did repost the link to the slides. So again, you do have email addresses for all of the panelists, and they're very willing to answer your questions and help out in any way.
thank you. Thanks,
Great.
Amy.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you for joining.
you.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
panelists.